Just after 9:30 p.m. on April 17, 2023, while threading my 12-year-old Honda Civic through the oilfield flats of southeastern New Mexico on US 380, the dashboard chimed the low fuel warning I'd ignored since Roswell. I figured I maybe had, 8 miles left until I was running on fumes. But the next open station, if the map app could even be trusted out here in these dead zones, was still 21 miles east in a dust-blown town called Arcadian Bluff. So, I eased off the accelerator, killed the AC, and let my speed bleed down to 50, hoping some hypermiling tricks would stretch vapor into salvation. The highway around me was just silent, except for the rhythmic tick of reflective posts flashing in my headlights. But the temperature outside still read 89, and mirages shimmered even under the starlight. Somewhere behind me, a pair of headlights crested a rise, bright white LED blades gaining way too quickly. I flicked my brights to signal for them to pass, but the vehicle, some lifted pickup, slowed just out of overtaking range, matching my pace exactly. Its beams filled my rear view like interrogation lamps, making it impossible to tell the make or catch the plates. My phone, service long gone, just kept cycling that spinning wheel on the map, and each mile marker I passed showed numbers decreasing in these weird, uneven jumps. 212, 207, 199, like the state had just forgotten basic arithmetic. When the fuel needle buried itself below E, the engine coughed once, then again, then caught. The truck behind me blared its horn. A flat, mechanical note, more like a fog siren than anything automotive. Off to the right, a crude dirt track cut toward a lone leaning sign hammered into the caliche. Gas 2 miles, arrow pointing into blackness where honestly, no glow suggested there were any pumps at all. I had no choice. The engine's sputters became full-on shudders, so I turned, gravel popping, and, sure enough, the pickup followed. Its horn quiet now. The track led over washboard ruts to a valley where floodlights on telescoping poles buzzed with that sodium yellow glow, lighting up a decrepit station. 2 ancient glass-top pumps, an office shack missing half its roof, and a towering horizontal tank marked Flammable 1203, leaking rust down the side. Despite the ruin, both pumps glowed neon open, and a digital price scrolled $0.00. My engine died as I coasted beside the island. The pickup idled behind me, then fell dark, engine off, but no door opened. I stepped onto cracked concrete, heat radiating like a forge. The pump's nozzle was already unlocked, hose twitching as if it was pressurized. I lifted it. The handle felt weirdly chilled, totally contradictory. And when I squeezed, colorless fuel gushed out. Silent. No clack of a meter. No vapor stink. The Civic's filler neck vibrated like a tuning fork. The gauge inside climbed unnaturally fast to full, then past, pin burying itself. I released the trigger. The flow stopped midstream, just like it had been severed by a valve, but not a single drop spilled. I called out toward the office shack, but nobody replied, though those fluorescent tubes were buzzing inside. Drawn by some weird compulsion, I went in. The floor was just covered. Burger wrappers, sun-bleached maps, paper cups, all printed with the same date. April 18th, 2023. That was, the next day. Behind the counter, the register display kept rolling transaction histories, endlessly repeating my card number. Every line said time 0942, quantity 12.9 gallons, price 0. The invoice numbers just kept going, into the thousands. There was a security monitor flickering with 4 feeds, same camera, just slightly different angles, all showing me standing at the counter from above, but the timestamps didn't match. One was 4 minutes ahead, one 10 behind, one stuck at 0942. In each feed, the version of me was lifting something invisible in the real room. A jerry can, painted black. The AC unit on the wall kicked on, blowing out chilled air that smelled like ozone and, hot metal. Then the exterior floodlights popped on. The truck outside was gone, replaced by this expanding pool of pitch on the ground, a perfect oval just swallowing up the light. Static burst from an old CB radio under the counter, then a voice started whispering mileage numbers, counting down 8, 7, 6. The register receipt printer started unspooling, the paper reading gallons owed. Suddenly, the pumps outside roared on, fuel spraying everywhere across the pavement. But it just evaporated in midair, leaving, like, no puddle at all. My phone buzzed, even though there was still no service. Its battery widget just scrolled $0 and 0 cents. The CB voice reached 0 and said, "Tank empty, pay balance." The breath behind my neck registered before I even turned. There was a man in mechanic coveralls, his face all wrapped up in ragged gauze, goggles reflecting this pale orange, holding the black jerry can, tipping it so the fluid inside sloshed with this hollow boom. Even from a few feet away, the can felt impossibly heavy, like it was filled with mercury or something. He pointed to my car. The Civic's tires were bulging, the gas gauge spinning like a clock losing its spring, the needle jittering, dash plastic warping outward like it was bladdered with expanding fuel. The air tasted like pennies. I bolted, but the office door was stuck, the handles smeared with some kind of tacky residue. The gauzed man took one step closer. The lights fluttered, and his goggles flashed the station sign, now reading "Always Owed." He set the jerry can on the counter, and the weight made the laminate buckle. Paper receipts whipped into a whirlwind, slashing my cheeks. I grabbed the can, thinking I'd hurl it through the window, but my arms almost buckled. Yet somehow I lifted it, surprised at my own strength, and sprinted outside. The pool of pitch had widened under my car, reflecting not the undercarriage but a night sky swirling with storm cells. I flung the can into that void. It vanished without a splash, and instantly the pumps went silent, the floodlights shut off, leaving only starlight. The Civic's body panels relaxed with these metallic pops, the gauge settling exactly at half a tank. The dirt track back to the highway felt shorter. The truck never reappeared. By dawn, I reached Arcadian Bluff, refueled at a real station. Pumps charged normal, receipt printed 12.9 gallons, even though I only topped off a half tank. On the credit card slip, someone had handwritten, "You're late," in greasy marker. Techs later found my Civic's tank capacity, inexplicably increased by 6 gallons. Seems unaltered. Worst of all, its range never exceeds half fill. Whenever I cross that mark, the gauge just pins E within miles, forcing me into stations I've never noticed before. Each time the attendant is absent, the receipt total reads $0, timestamp 0942, and there's this faint smell of ozone riding the breeze until I drive off, owing some ledger that measures distance in fear and fuel that costs everything but money. In the icy pre-dawn hush of January 27th, 2024, while steering my rental panel van south along mile 347 of the Blue Ridge Parkway near Roanoke, Virginia, the gauge that had shown a comforting quarter tank all night blinked empty in one sudden convulsion, the needle dropping past the peg as if the vehicle had just exhaled its last vapor. Coasting on reserve throttle, I rolled past snow-dusted overlooks until the engine coughed into silence beside an unlit, scenic pull-off, where the only human thing visible was a weather-beaten service road sign that read, "Maintenance Depot 0.9 miles downgrade. Arrow trembling in the wind like a subtle dare." And, because cell coverage was just a rumor up on that ridge and the temperature hovered near 19, I decided to hike the slope and beg diesel from whatever generator surely powered the depot's radio tower. visible as a black lattice against a bruised sky. The walk felt longer than advertised, a series of switchbacks buried under crusted sleet. Yet at the bottom I reached a chain-link yard ringed by plows and salt spreaders, all dark except for one prefab office trailer washed in dim amber from a single sodium bulb. The bulb flickered to life the moment my boot crossed the gate break, and inside the yard, an old-style above-ground diesel pump stood intact, nozzle holstered, keypad blinking enter unit number, its display astonishingly bright for a system that should have been padlocked after hours. I kind of half-laughed at the luck, rummaged my pockets for anything 8 digits, and typed the van's plate, whereupon the screen scrolled unit accepted, gallons authorized, 18.0, a number matching the van's spec sheet, though I had never input capacity. The pump motor clanked awake in the stillness, a heartbeat rhythm muffled by frost. I fetched the empty 5-gallon jerry can strapped to the depot fence for snow machines and squeezed the trigger. Yet no diesel smell rose. Instead, wisps of silvery vapor vented like liquid nitrogen while the meter silently raced upward, dispensing 4-5 gallons in seconds without weight accumulating, the can staying nearly empty though the gauge suggested half full. Condensation crawled along the nozzle hose and crystallized into letters spelling keep, jagged ice writing itself as I watched. The depot office trailer groaned and its door eased open, interior lit by CRT glow, computer fans spinning though nobody manned the desk, and a paper logbook lay open to today's date already signed in my handwriting with a note authorizing emergency fuel release under Blue Ridge event code 347A, a code I had never heard but which rang inside my mind the way déjà vu curves reality. A printer churned behind the monitor, spitting a single folded map showing my van's position on the parkway represented by a pulsing red dot creeping north despite the engine being dead. The caption beneath reading, idle gauge. Drift fuel not lost only promised, a phrase that honestly tasted like penny metal when sounded in my head. Cold needled my lungs, so I fled the office, capped the can though it remained suspiciously light, and began the uphill trudge. Every 50 steps the can vibrated, liquid inside thickening, generating a dull hum that harmonized with distant transformers, though I saw no power lines. Halfway up the grade, a maintenance plow rumbled downhill lights off, rolling at gravity speed though the driver's seat appeared empty. Windshield glazed in rime. It scraped by inches from me, and in the frost on its door someone had finger-written, "Full tanks pay. Empty tanks owe." The vehicle coasted out of view without skid or engine brake. Tires whispering over ice like they were gliding on polished steel instead of asphalt. So, when I reached the van, I noticed the interior courtesy light was somehow glowing, even though the battery was completely dead. The dashboard now read range 999 miles, and the fuel gauge wasn't just full. It was actually an inch past full, with the needle kind of shivering against the stopper. I went ahead and poured from the can anyway, and, well, I felt this weird tug, like the filler neck actually inhaled, yanking the nozzle right out of my gloved hand. It guzzled every last drop of that ethereal fuel until the can just cracked with this vacuum pop and collapsed, like spent foil. But, you know, not a single drop spilled onto the road. Right after that, the range counter started ticking down way faster than seconds on a stopwatch. 999, 940, 880. Even as the engine idled in neutral, even though I hadn't turned the key. Then the radio suddenly crackled to life, and it started broadcasting my name in this monotone voice, counting down the remaining miles like a launch countdown, and warning me that breaker penalties would apply when the gauge illusions ran out. I threw the van into drive, the wheels spinning on crust before finally catching, and I barreled south. But the range just plummeted to 100 within minutes, and the headlights kept dimming whenever the number dipped below multiples of 7. At mile marker 340, the dash flashed unit return prompt, and just then, the same plow from earlier showed up in my mirrors. No driver. Grill covered in needles of ice that bounced my headlights right back at me. Every time I tried to accelerate, there was no change in RPM, but the speed increased anyway, like the road itself was shrinking beneath me. The map printout on the passenger seat started updating too, with black marker strokes forming loops ahead. These detours that forced me down an exit I'd never even noticed before. Right back into the depot yard, even though I'd driven straight. Time just fractured. My watch still said it was before dawn, but the horizon brimmed with this coral pink sunrise, and the pump marquee now displayed balance due. 18.0 gallons. That's when I realized the system had never actually pumped diesel, only mirrored my hope, trading some kind of intangible credit for distance I'd already traveled since leaving Roswell like 2 days ago. The office CRT now showed breaker fees, and it underlined one item: memory of heat, which was slowly counting down. The air inside the van felt absolutely Antarctic frost feathering across the windshield, as if all the seasons had just evacuated. Then a sentence scrolled across the pump, saying the only way out was to restore gallons by giving up miles I'd never actually driven. With no other options, I reached down and reversed the odometer trip knob. The numbers flipped backward under my trembling fingers, and at each lost mile, the pump display clicked down a gallon until it finally hit 0. The headlights brightened, warmth started seeping back into the cabin, but now the trip reading sat at -137, an impossible subtraction that somehow left me owing journeys I'd never even taken. When the sun finally rose for real, I limped into Roanoke on fumes, or maybe on nothing but borrowed vacancy. A mechanic confirmed the tank brimmed with air pockets, not fuel. Yet the gauge sometimes pegs past full, and a distant engine echo repeats beneath floorboards whenever I pass mile marker 347, like the depot still tethered an invisible hose to my movement, tracking owed distance, waiting for the moment the needle hits exact empty so it can siphon more than diesel, maybe seasons of warmth. Maybe future road, until my ledger balances at 0 and the breaker finally trips. At 11:58 p.m. on September 14th, 2023, while arrowing my rental hatchback across the endless grid of western Kansas along State Route 156, the fuel gauge that had shown an easy third suddenly flatlined to 0, with the red warning light flaring like an ember in the wheat-scented dark, and I realized I'd underestimated the gap between stations by more than 40 miles. The engine stuttered twice before coasting, and I drifted onto the gravel shoulder beside fields, shorn to stubble after harvest, their silhouettes waving in warm wind that smelled of dust and cut stems. Cell reception winked away, the moonless sky revealed a smear of lightning to the south, and the only landmark ahead was a handmade plywood billboard lit by a single battery lamp that blinked out-of-hours fuel, 0.5 miles. Arrow itself a surreal promise in a county where every pump closes at sunset. Desperate to avoid a night sleeping with rattlesnakes on the prairie, I grabbed a flashlight and the empty 3-gallon plastic can from the trunk and followed a tractor path through rustling stalks. The crunch beneath my boots disappearing after 50 steps as soil turned oddly spongy, like damp peat. Soon an old-fashioned farmstead emerged. Weather-gray barn, sagging farmhouse, and, miraculously, a solitary vintage gas pump painted John Deere green positioned beneath a leafless cottonwood. The globe on top glowing though no wires fed it. The pump's analog face displayed all 0 gallons sold and all 0 price. Nozzle already unholstered, hose leading into shadows as if someone had just fueled a phantom truck. No insects chirped, yet A slow, rhythmic creak carried from the barn, as though a swing swayed inside. I called out, my voice just swallowed by the night. No answer. So, I placed the can beneath the nozzle and lifted the tarnished handle. The pump motor woke with this deep metallic groan, but instead of that gasoline scent, a metallic tang, like warm pennies, rose up as crimson fluid gushed out thick as syrup, filling the can impossibly fast while the meter just stayed at zeros. My flashlight beam showed the gas reflecting the moonless sky in oily swirls, but the liquid actually cooled the plastic instead of warming it. Chilled, I released the lever. The flow stopped instantly, yet the can weighed only half what 3 gallons should. The fluid levels inside writhed like something alive, seeking lower ground. Before doubt could really override panic, the lights snapped on inside the farmhouse, each bulb flickering red, illuminating a front porch crowded with antique scarecrows leaning against the railings. Their burlap faces sagged into stitched smiles, those straw gloves pointing right in my direction. At the same time, the barn doors yawned open and a shadow tall as the hayloft emerged, the outline of a reaper machine, or maybe, the farmer who once drove it, though its limbs seemed jointed backward. I backed away until the pump's metal base rattled beneath my heel, revealing this brass hatch labeled counterweight. Its latch already popped. Curiosity, or maybe dread, made me kneel. Inside there were row upon row of old driver's licenses, each one punctured dead center at the jugular photo. Blood rust flakes dried around the holes. The topmost ID actually bore my photo, though the date of issue was tomorrow. Thunder rolled, the air just electric. The scarecrows dismounted the porch rails in jerky, stop-motion strides. Straw feet rustling quicker than any breeze, converging on the pump like guardians of a tithe. I bolted toward the road, clutching the can that now sloshed with hollow echoes. But every 20 yards, the weight changed, sometimes yanking my arm near its socket, other times nearly floating. Behind me, the pump began chinging, sail bell ringing through the meter still read all zeros, while the barn's shadow figure revved a hidden engine, a combine roar louder than the sky. Reaching the hatchback, I fumbled with the cap and poured. The viscous liquid flowed eagerly, no splashbacks, as though the tank's throat sucked it in. Within seconds, the gauge inside rose past full, needle striking the peg with a sound like glass cracking. The engine, off just moments ago, turned over without the key, dashboard lighting up vermilion. Against all reason, I jumped in, door half shut, and the car peeled onto the tarmac under its own throttle heading east, away from the original route. The steering wheel fought back, twitching toward fields where distant harvesters' floodlights awakened. Machines idling, though no drivers, sat in the cabins. My phone screen lit up despite zero coverage. A new app installing itself. Red line. Icon a spinning pump globe. It opened on a map, tracing every rural road in red, next destination pulsing 10 miles ahead. Draw down. I wrestled the wheel, managing to redirect toward the main highway. Engines of unseen tractors paralleled me between silos, their lights flickering like predator eyes. The fuel gauge didn't drop with speed. Instead, a second needle appeared. Red, counting down separate from miles driven, labeled gallons owed. With each breath, the number increased. I slammed on the brakes. The car skidded. Engine kept revving to drag me toward a derelict way station ahead whose pumps already glowed identical John Deere green. Concrete around them glistened dark, as if perpetually wet. Realizing the pattern, I killed the ignition and jumped clear. The hatchback continued rolling driverless, parking itself beside pump 1, the nozzle unhooked magnetically, hose slithering into the filler neck like a leech. On impact, the car's paint blistered, tires sagged, as though blood drained instead of fuel given. Under pale dawn, I trudged back toward Route 156 on foot, canister discarded, now bone dry despite residue on my boots smelling of cut iron. Along the shoulder, a new handmade billboard awaited installation, blank except for stenciled words. Complimentary fill-up 0.5 miles, arrow freshly painted. Nailed beneath, a clipboard held tomorrow's date and a sign-in sheet listing one typed name, mine. Ink still drying. Even now, each time my city sedan drops to a quarter tank, the Redline app resurrects, rerouting me to back roads where pop-up farm pumps offer free gallons. If I obey, the car guzzles crimson and rides smooth. But the gallons owed counterswells. If I resist, the needle plummets to zero regardless of fresh fill-ups, stranding me until scarecrow silhouettes appear at the field edges, beckoning with burlap smiles. I keep city miles short, brakes ready, and eyes on the odometer, because someplace in the wheat, a reaper engine idles, waiting for my balance to break into harvest season. Running on empty can cost more than a tow. Sometimes it collects your memories, your miles, even your pulse. If these out-of-gas nightmares left your tank of fear overflowing, like, share, subscribe, and slam the bell icon, because the next low-fuel light you ignore might be your last warning.